Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Fandom Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail C. Martin, and tonight we are talking about the different kinds of families we've seen in Supernatural. Mortal families, immortal families, divine families, creature families. It's all there. So we're going to be talking about that tonight. But first, let me have our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Carole Malcolm.
Hi, I'm Carole Malcolm. I am the director of the DragonCon Urban Fantasy Track, and we do cover Supernatural there. Gail has been joining me in our monthly Supernatural Rewind panels, where last year we started by going back to season 1. I figured I needed to do that because though I've been watching the show from the very beginning when it first aired on television, it'd been a long time since I'd seen an awful lot of the episodes. So it was time to go back and redo it, to rewatch it. And but I've been covering it on the track since 2013 when the track was formed anyway. So it seemed a good time in these days of so many virtual things to be able to go back and do it. So I'm happy to come here and talk more Supernatural whenever I'm able.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to have you. Anna?
I'm Anna Kensing. I have been a fan since pretty much the first season. I definitely watched the first season when it aired, and probably season 2 and maybe 3. I took a bit of a hiatus, I think, and then I got back into it later. And I write romance, mostly romance on the side, and dabble in some Supernatural fanfic occasionally as well.
Awesome. Carole?
I'm Carole Stokes. I've been a fan of Supernatural since season 3. I started writing fanfic in 2012. It's all on AO3 under Fire Sign 10. And I love to talk about Supernatural.
And I'm Gail C. Martin, and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But all the modern worlds are ones Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home. So we've done a bunch of panels on Continual about the Winchester family and the family dynamics and the dysfunctionality, and kind of picked that to pieces. But there were a lot of other families that we've seen depicted in Supernatural over the years. Some of them are found families. Some of them are families by blood, one way or the other. And so I thought it made sense to kind of come back and take a look at some of those and see what insights into the show and the characters we get from those. And let's start with Jody and the girls that she's collected along the way. Some people get puppies, other people get
traumatized children, teenagers.
Yeah. But even though we never got Wayward Sisters as they envisioned it, we do see Jody and Donna and the girls numerous times. What's your headcanon, or what are your thoughts about how that found family functions? Carole, Malcolm?
Well, I think it's just like anything. It's like anything else. You get a lot of teens together in one space, and it can be joyful and fun and lots of energy. I used to work with teenagers, and that's one thing that I always really appreciated about them. But it can also be very tense and very dramatic and all of that. So my guess is that that things were probably like that pretty much all the time, kind of a roller coaster. I think that the young ladies involved, and not to mention Jody herself, I mean, I think for Jody, it was a real purpose. It gave her something to do that, it gave her another family, kind of, to take these traumatized teenage girls and put them all together. And I think that the girls themselves, even though we saw from the episodes that we did see where they were kind of gathering as they went. As the seasons progressed, a few more would turn up here and there. I think we saw that they did have that little bit of headbutting at first, but it became where they really admired each other's strengths, started to feel as though, okay, you might not be my blood kin, but you're still my sister. And I think they probably managed to do pretty well, considering, because when it comes down to it, a lot of people, when you have this family feeling, whether it is found family or actual blood family, it's like, well, you can kind of circle the wagons and it's us against the world. Well, in their case, it was them against, they knew a lot of things that were out there in the world that most people didn't know about. So, for them, that was an extra bond, I think.
Okay. Anna?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think that, since Jody kind of first, I mean, she met Alex first, right? In the Alex, Alexis,
Right.
Anne episode. And, she came across this young woman who had been taken from her own family and had, sort of formed a family with her vampire family. And then I'm not sure that Jody could have let her go, based upon Jody's own experiences with the supernatural and losing her husband and her child in the ways that she did when she saw Alex. Like any other of the victims that Jody deals with in her, day-to-day life as a police officer, she can turn them over to Child Protective Services or, victim advocates or whatever. But this is a young person whose life was completely destroyed by the supernatural. And based on Jody's own experience, I don't think that she could have let that go. And so the only obvious thing for Jody is to take this young woman in and, not replace her family, because I don't think she even tried that, but to, try to be a parental figure for her in a way that acknowledged her trauma and, sort of provided her with a safe space to heal from it. And the same thing with Claire Novak, so which is why Dean suggested that when he stumbled across Claire, later, that Jody might be the kind of person that she could go to have a home. So, I think that I'm not sure that that's definitely not the life that Jody envisioned for herself, I think.
Right.
But I think it's the only life that she really could have had after she knew what she knew.
Okay. Carole Stokes?
Well, definitely all of them knowing about what was out there in the dark is a huge unifying factor. And yeah, for Jody to take all these girls in, she had this strong maternal side. She really was a nurturing person, and it really fulfills her to kind of take care of people. I think that's one reason she's even in the work she's in, because she wants to help people and take care of people. And here she's doing it on a really, really personal level, first with Alex and Claire, and then the other girls. And while I may not have been a fan of the Wayward Sisters as a spin-off premise, the family group that they create, I think, is really, really great. You really see them, even as their different personalities may clash and they butt heads. And so, I mean, we see that, of course, with Alex and Claire, and they're like kind of bitching at each other like sisters do. But they have each other's backs, and as Anna said, they have a safe space to be able to deal with this stuff emotionally, and learn how to deal with it and still function in the world, because they're not becoming hermits. They have to still, make their place in the world and stuff. So I think that's a really great family unit that comes together. And then when they add Donna in, even though like Donna's the cool aunt, the cool aunt. So, Jody's the mom, but Donna's the cool aunt, and, she'll take them out to buy makeup and stuff.
Right.
Or bullets.
You
Or
know?
both.
Yeah. you know, and she'll show them the
Or
cool
both.
guns as well as the cool eyeshadow.
Both.
Make it
So
a
she
regular
meshes-
shopping spree, yeah.
Right. So she meshes really well in with that. And also then is, you know, she and Jody are their own kind of subunit because they're older and adults and can share things on a different level than you would with those who are younger than yourselves. So I think that's
And
one
I
of the
mean,
really
we have to talk
strongest
about the scene.
I'm sorry.
We have to talk about the scene at the dinner table with
Oh.
Sam and Dean, and
Oh, yeah.
Jody is talking with Alex about the safe sex and enlisting Dean and Sam to give the guy's perspective and just making them deeply, deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah, I just watched that.
I don't think we've
episode
ever seen
recently.
Dean drink so much wine as opposed to whiskey or beer.
Grip on the chalice. You know, if you ever wanted to see the difference between Dean Winchester and Jensen Ackles, look at how they hold a wine. Dean's holds on to that thing like it's gonna fight.
Like it's a Viking mug.
Yeah, I just watched that and I thought it was interesting that, you know, Dean, as uncomfortable as Sam and Dean were at the table with that conversation, Dean does tell Jody that, you know, would have been nice if somebody had had that conversation with them, you know,
Right,
nobody ever
right.
did. But
John
I thought that was
Winchester's
interesting.
plus parenting.
Well, and really, can anybody imagine Bobby? No.
No, not so much, yeah. Much as he was a great father figure, yeah, that doesn't sound as though it would have been in his wheelhouse, yeah.
I can see him handing off a box of Trojans to Dean and going, wrap it up.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. That's it.
Yeah.
I can just see that happening. And maybe Sam, not so much. But
Well,
here,
Sam got the box from Dean. Dean
Yeah.
handed the box to Sam.
Right,
Right.
right.
Sam,
Same
here's
speech.
the book. Any questions? Don't ask me. Yeah, I can see that maybe.
Uh,
But just the fact that she's coming home and making these dinners for everybody. She's had a hard day and it's not just takeout or frozen meals. She's making real chicken. And, you know, Dean's enraptured. You mean you eat like this every night?
Every day, yeah.
It's just chicken. Oh, it's so good. You know, and she sends him home with leftovers and Tupperware.
Yeah, that was great. Sam
Hilarious.
could barely carry it all. Yeah, that was.
Tupperware in the bunker. Yeah, I love that. But like you said, very maternal to be feeding them and, you know, bringing them into dinner, even though there isn't nearly as much of a age gap between Jody and the boys to be a mother figure. That's still very much the role she takes on with them, or at least a very maternal older sister.
Well, she
Yeah,
even
I've always,
like,
yeah.
don't make me use the mom voice. You know?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And she's not afraid to go after Mary, you know, in the Asa Fox episode to kind of set the level there that, you know, these are good boys. Don't screw it up.
Yeah.
Too bad the horse had already left the barn at that point.
Yeah, I kind of
Yeah.
had. Somebody pointed out, talking about families, what the heck was going on with Asa Fox that you have a hunter who doesn't have any devil's traps, no salt, no protections on the house. You know, what kind of a hunter house is this?
A little complacent, wasn't he? Yeah.
That whole episode was a little inexplicable to me in a number of ways.
I think Camediox did a cartoon about it.
Yes, I was
And
just thinking of that.
And the comment from Asa's mother was, I don't want to mess up the wood floors.
Oh, God. Well, guess
Oh,
what's going to
man.
happen to them if you don't put something, but whatever.
Blood is a lot.
Uh,
I was just gonna say the blood sinks in the grain and you can't get it out.
That sounds weirdly like you've had experience, Carole.
we say this with such authority because we know.
We're writers. We know these things. Well, now another family that we only got to see a little bit of was the Milligans, Adam and his mom, with John's A+ parenting coming and going and mostly going. we meet them after they're dead, which it's supernatural. It isn't all that weird. This happens all the time. But we do get some insights into what things might have been like for them before the ghouls showed up. Any thoughts about that family unit, especially, you know, compare contrast to John with his other kids? Anna?
Well, I mean, you know, sort of the obvious of like that Adam gets to go to baseball games with John,
Right.
and you know, doesn't learn how to shoot by the time he's 6 years old. It doesn't start learn to drive when he's 10, having you know, like sitting on telephone books and, you know, with a wood block underneath the pedal. You know, so I mean, I do think that John was trying to do something different and better with this unexpected kid that he couldn't do with Sam and Dean, because he, you know, didn't have all of the trauma built up into it. You know, like it was not at all surprising to find out that John is a bit of a, you know, he takes his comfort where he can find it on the road, and accidents happen. And so what's possibly more surprising is that there weren't more of them.
That we know of, we were ever privy to.
Thanks to Ancestry.com and 23andMe, there's probably this whole subset of, you know, wayward Winchesters. Oh, yeah.
That's
so I
true.
do think,
Yeah.
you know, so I do think that John was really deliberately trying to do something different, you know, sort of be the kind of father that he would have been if things hadn't happened the way that they did. And it is truly unfortunate that, you know, Sam and Dean didn't get that kind of a father. But I mean, like, what else, right? Like, his choices were to never see Adam, you know, this kid from, you know, and have no relationship, like just be a deadbeat dad and never like respond to the mother of his child. Bring Adam and his mother into the life the way that Dean and raise Adam the way that he raised Sam and Dean in the life. That seems deeply unfair when there's no reason to. So, you know, I think that, you know, he did the best he could with the situation he had, the circumstances that presented, and the sort of coping skills that he had. You know, like Adam himself and sort of the rest of Adam's storyline was never really my favorite parts of the show, but I don't dislike or have any issues with John and the choices that he made in terms of dealing with this unexpected kid that he accidentally fathered.
Okay.
I think that there's a big factor here in that I don't think he knew about Adam for several years. The impression I got was that he didn't come across Adam until Adam was already like 10, 11, I think. And so here we're talking about a situation where the mother has already structured everything. So I don't think he could have come in and taken over in this way he did with Sam and Dean, because she wasn't going to let him. You know, I mean, she knew he was a hunter, but she would not have let him do that. And things were already up and running by then. They already had their lives. They had it set out. She was a single mom. They were doing their thing. And I think she would not have allowed him to commandeer Adam's life in the same way he did Sam and Dean's, which he had from the get-go. You know, and there just was no alternative. I mean, it could be the kind of thing where had Mary not been flambéed, there might have been more kind of a balance struck where maybe they would have learned to hunt, but still had some life, but without that counterbalance, without that role there. But whereas Adam had that, you know, and his mother, even as we see her portrayed by the ghoul, was pretty forthright, and I don't picture her, you know, I picture her saying to John, well, you can see him, but you ain't, you know, he ain't going off with you.
Weekend visits only.
Yeah.
The thing it reminded me of is I've known people who were the kids from the first marriage. The first marriage breaks up, probably has a lot of discord, a lot of strife in the breaking, and the kids take the brunt of it. Then there's the second marriage, and now everybody's happy, and maybe they're better off financially, and they're in a much better place with this new parent. And now there are new half brothers and sisters who never knew the struggle. And, it's very easy, rightfully or wrongfully, to think those new kids are more loved because they certainly are getting the advantages. They haven't had the tough stuff. And that creates, tension. That's very hard to blend that back together again, because the older kids really did get a raw deal, and they're one step removed from this new idyllic family. And so I think we saw some of that. Dean was just flat out jealous of Adam in many,
Yeah.
and you
Absolutely.
can't blame him, just flat out jealous. And Sam, I think, was hurt, but he really made an effort to try to be a good big brother to Adam in the limited time that they had, which makes me wonder, if they hadn't already been dead, if they hadn't been ghouls, if they really had been, real living people, what do you think Sam and Dean would have done after the situation? Would they have ever gone back to visit? Would they have stayed in touch with Adam? Would they have tried to get to know his mom?
Sam would, I think.
Huh?
But
I think
Sam would, and he probably would have done it on the DL too, at least at first.
At least until he got it established, and then he could ease Dean into it and say,
Mhm.
okay, I've already done the hard stuff. Really, they're not as bad as you think. What do you think, Carole Malcolm?
About that particular point, or about the original question, or some combination of their?
Combination of the two.
Well, I think I think Carole makes a good point that it seemed as though from what we were told that John had become aware of Adam when Adam was already, he was still a young child, but he wasn't a little kid. So, and he had this other mother there. I think, we rag on John Winchester and his parenting skills a lot, and deservedly so. But at the same time, because I think that mainly what the problem was with him was that he was the only parent left, and he had this single focus. That was all. And he thought, well, as long as my kids have something to eat and they're okay, then they'll be fine. He can go after this single-minded goal that he had, and the heck with everything else, right? But in the case with Adam, that wouldn't have been, that would not have been the case. It was not the same at all. It was like, well, this is your biological child, and yes, it would be nice if you want to get to know him, but yeah, he's, as you said, Carole, he's not going anywhere with you. I mean, not out on the road.
Right.
No home visits, but that would have been hard anyway, because it's not as though John had an actual home base at that point anyway. So I think that, that Adam and his mom, they were a very self-contained unit, and they probably would have been just as well off without John's involvement. Having John was kind of, who would show up, and he was sort of, if he's taking him to ball games and all these things, he's not quite the Disneyland dad, but kind of, trying to make up for all of these things. And so it was nice for Adam, and yet at the same time, it may not have been this like super essential thing, because I don't think does it ever say in that episode where we first meet him, does it ever say how often John went by? It seemed as though it was kind of erratic. It wasn't like, it didn't sound as though, well, I went over once a month, or anything like that. But
when he was in that neck of the woods.
Right.
It
wasn't,
and I mean,
it was, go ahead, Anne.
How many times do you think Adam said to his mom, well, Dad would let me do this?
Yeah, well, but I don't think that probably too many, just because.
Well, no, just to like be an asshole to his mom, right? Like kids do, right? How many times do
He
you think his
could.
mom heard that from Adam? It's like, your dad is such a deadbeat. He can't even be bothered to show up more than once, every other year. Your dad would let you do this.
So, I think in that case, it would, John, even though he knew John was his father, he probably was kind of like, oh, you have the cool uncle who comes to visit and takes you to a ball game, or he does this, that, and the other. So I don't think that, I think that that he and his mom were probably the self-contained unit that had this visitor every now and then. If they had survived, I think that I think that Dean would have come around. I don't think that he would have resented, the kid. I mean, even though he was obviously jealous when he finds out that he gets to do all this stuff, that's not on the kid, that's on John. And I mean, and even though people have this, this gut reaction initially, when you logically think about it, it's like, okay, well, maybe my dad took him to the ball games, but that was dad's decision, not, had nothing to do with this kid who was, maybe 12 at the time when he got to go or whatever. So I do think that they would have, tried to form some kind of a relationship, but it would have been tricky in terms of the narrative of the show, just because the show itself is, so focused on the two of them and their other found family, let alone having someone who was blood brought in.
I think it's also interesting. We know that Henry disappeared when John was pretty young. And absent anything like, John's mother crawled into a bottle and didn't come back out, or went into stripping, or, um,
or both,
yeah, or something. You've got a single mom trying to raise a son, and you've also got Adam with a single mom trying to raise a son. So I wonder about that resonance with John, if he saw that mirror image.
It's like there's might be a curse or something.
Yeah, maybe
on this family.
And the other thing I've always wondered is, kid, single mom, probably working 2 jobs to get by, even without stripping. Was John a latchkey kid in a very conventional sense? And so did he in some ways use that to say, oh, well, mom left all the time when she was working. I got myself dinner. The boys have each other and they'll be fine. Not really wanting to look too closely at the fact that the boys are in a crappy motel. Boys are being chased by monsters.
right.
Boys have a gun under the pillow. It's really not, I'm in this suburban house by myself. And I really hadn't thought about that until just now, but sometimes we play all kinds of mental games to say, well, it'll be okay. I got through it. But he didn't get this thing.
Yeah, I'm still alive, but yeah, well, not for long.
Yeah. I just, you kind of wonder what goes through some of the characters' heads.
Right.
Now, oddly enough, one of the most functional families we've seen is Garth the Werewolf. Now, Beth's family, maybe not so much with the killer mom. But I don't think we ever really know much about Garth's background, do we? Who he,
I think so.
Where he comes from.
No, and again, I'll bring up the fact that he was only actually in 7 episodes of the whole show, which I think is remarkable for a character that doesn't have, that was only there that many times, that had the impact that he did. In terms of, in terms of the character. Now, granted, Dean and Sam talk about him a fair amount, or they're talking to him on the phone, or Bobby's talking to him on the phone, which is the first time we hear his name, I think, is Weekend at Bobby's. But yeah, anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt, but just the fact that I don't think, I am agreeing with you. I don't think we have heard anything about his background.
Yeah, he was in dental school
Yeah.
Right.
before he started hunting, and he got into the life because he somehow killed the tooth fairy. I think we never get the story about how he managed to kill the tooth fairy, but yeah, like that's pretty much all we know about his background, is that he was going to be a dentist and he killed the tooth fairy.
And then he goes back and becomes a dentist for werewolves.
Right,
Yeah.
which is great.
You wonder, is there the occasional good vampire who, chipped a fang, and where else are you going to go?
Right, where else are we gonna go?
Yeah, other kinds of shifters.
You chomp down on that cow bone when you're eating the cattle, you're like, oh darn it.
Right? When you're Lenora's
That's a
family.
fang.
But we see Garth in that last episode we see him in with a very stable, conventional family. Just kind of a small miracle. Anybody have any thoughts
He's so
about?
grounded. He's just such a grounded character, though. You know what I mean? He's very unflappable, for all that he's a little bit goofy. And certainly at first, everyone's like, oh yeah, he's like, it's all about Marmaduke and stuff. But he's really, he just kind of goes along and does this thing, and he's really mellow about stuff, and wants everyone to be good with each other. I mean, there was the cursed penny, and he's like, now come on guys, let's just talk about this. And so at least for him, I think it's not a stretch that he ended up in this somewhat alternative lifestyle of werewolves, but yet very, the
Very
wife and the
traditional, yeah.
kids and the house, and he's wearing the sweater vest, and that bastion of domestic male clothing, the sweater vest. So of all the people, it makes sense that he would be.
Yeah, like he was going to be a dentist, and somehow or another he ended up killing the tooth fairy, and then he becomes a hunter, and then Bobby dies, and he kind of takes over. But he's just like adaptable.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
can step into the breach, sort of wherever he's needed, right? He can step up and be what is needed in the moment, and
he has this kind of intrinsic innocence, I think, like the whole thing with the alcohol demon.
I love that
He's
episode.
like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I drank
2
a
wine
whole
coolers.
beer, like I'm snookered. So he has this kind of like innocence, but it serves him really well. He's innocent, but he's not stupid, and he's not blind. He sees it all, but he just goes right on through. And so he made it. He made it to the apple pie life.
Yeah,
With
and
the
he's
side of werewolf.
not to mention he lived past past the end of the series, or as far as we know. I mean, where it ended for most of the characters. And I agree. I think that he is that grounded person. When we first meet him, he comes off as being kind of goofy, but the one thing that he does from the beginning is that he can read people. He's good at doing that. And like Dean likes to always tell Sam, well, you're better at the talky stuff. When if you have to explain something, so it's like Sam gets to tell people about the monster things or whatever. But I think that Garth really is better when it comes to like interviewing people when they're doing their fake thing. He has a way of doing it that makes him not quite so standoffish sometimes as the guys sometimes come across, I think. And
Mr. Feasels knows when you are lying.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, just stuff like that. I think that we see even in those beginning episodes, when we see that he's being goofy, at the same time he's providing a very important service to what they're trying to do. Even if he does get knocked out, I think it's the first 2 times we see him, he ends up getting knocked out and misses all the action. He wakes up, what did I miss? It's like, oh no. And I'm glad they didn't do that with him forever. But and as far as taking over for Bobby goes, I think that that's something he could have done anyway if people had accepted the fact that he was werewolf, because he had expressed an issue or expressed an idea of doing that. He was like, I could really help because now I have this extra strength and this extra, I have some extra senses and I could really help you guys. But the fact is that even if they accepted him, a lot of the other hunters maybe wouldn't have. But if he had been, I could have seen him if they had been, if people had been accepting of him continuing on kind of in that Bobby role. When you somebody mentioned that he stood up for himself. There was the episode where he is doing the Bobby job and Dean gets upset with him and but Garth stands up to Dean and says, look, you're not the only one who lost him. We all did. And even though Sam and Dean have had a special relationship with Bobby, Garth was pointing out, well, that all of the hunters did. They had something special. And I think that he had to do that. And the way he did it, he wasn't like, he wasn't angry when he did it because he understood, because he understands people, understood where Dean was coming from. So I don't know, maybe he went into practice as a dentist / psychoanalyst for the supernatural creature set.
It's like when you go to the hairdresser, you tell them all your problems, only here you go to the dentist.
Right, exactly.
It's
For
hard.
everything.
It's a little
your mouth
harder.
is propped open.
That's right.
Exactly.
Now, we saw the werewolf family pull it off pretty well. But we've seen several vampire families that didn't do quite so well. We saw Alex's original nest. We saw Lenore try to pull a nest together and do no harm. And then we saw the original nest that Sam and Dean broke up and let somebody escape, and darned if it didn't come back 15 years later to cause a problem.
And the alpha vampire and his nest and his family too. Yeah.
So is there something fundamentally different about vampires trying to create a family as opposed to some of the other creatures? Anybody who wants to can jump in on that one.
Well, I think their habits, for one thing. I mean, werewolves are still, they're still, they eat the same things that other humans do, that they, and even though vampires might look human until they open their mouths and show their teeth, depending upon, I guess, their mood, if they really want to show you the whole mouth full of teeth. I think that, there are probably some differences there. I think in terms of, the werewolves are probably, they may have extended lifespans. I'm not sure about it in the terms of, as far as the universe of the world of supernatural goes, because I don't remember it ever being addressed. Like, how long do they continue to live? Is it do they age more slowly? But we know that vampires are going to be around, that unless Sam and Dean find them or some other hunters, and there's kind of a different attitude towards, I think, just the way that they look at life.
Well, werewolves are pack animals. Wolves are pack animals.
Right,
Vampires
right.
are kind of lone hunters. So that in itself is an issue. They're all kind of apex predators.
Right, except for Alex's family did kind of, I mean, they felt as though, they had this bond, and, it wasn't a good one, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, they did have some kind of a bond. But I do think that it probably has something to do with their basic physiology and just their attitude towards, the rest of the world. I mean, because vampires don't have a lot of choice in what they do to stay alive, whereas, werewolves have a wider dietary choice, for themselves. So it makes it a little easier to, make a group that can do things together or whatever.
I think the difference in the family structure, I mean, is as Gail said, wolves are pack animals to begin with. So it's completely makes sense that then werewolves would be as well. You know, between being men and wolves, they're
Right.
social creatures. The thing with a vampire is it's not so much having peer family around you, it's you're creating your children. So a vampire wants to create more vampires around them, but they remain at the top. It's not like with Garth and his vampire family, they were all kind of on a level field. Whereas vampires are always going to be whoever's the sire, and then there's your children.
There's everybody else, yeah.
And so you're living together a lot as a nest and everything, but you're not in a peer family. You're in a really defined structure. I mean, even if you go back to Dracula and he had his 3 sisters and everything was about making his children, it was very much that he was the boss. And we see that with the Alpha Vamp. And we see that in Live Free or Try Hard, where Boris is the boss. And he's got all those other vampires, but they are kowtowing to him. You know, it's not a family like, hey, let's sit down and, you know, watch Friends together. And then
Although, you know, some vampires might like that. Spike would
they
probably.
really might. They may or may not. Then they decide who would be yummier to eat. But also, you know, with Benny, and he goes back to his pack, you know, his nest, and it's Quentin and Andrea. And once again, they are the big honchos and everybody else is subservient to them. So it's a really different, it's a family structure, but it's a very, very different one from the werewolves. And, you know, someone could probably do like a dissertation on that, but
Someone probably already has.
has.
probably already has. But that's my, in a nutshell,
Mhm.
you know, discernment on it.
Well, folks, we have blown through our time, as we often do. So before we wrap things up, let's let everybody say where people can find you online. And I'm going to go in reverse order this time and start with Carole Stokes.
I'm here on Facebook as Carole M. Stokes. You'll see me on continual panels, and you'll see me in the TFWNC group. On Twitter, you can see me as true_firesign10, and all of my fanfic is on AO3 under firesign10. Mind the tags.
Anna?
You can find me at annakensing.com. I'm on Instagram at Anna Kensing, and I am actually now on TikTok at Anna Kensing Books.
Nice. Carole Malcolm?
Yes, the DragonCon Urban Fantasy Track page on Facebook is fairly active all year long. I say fairly mainly because I do something with it pretty much every day, except, you know, when it's closer to con, it's going to be a lot more often. So if you go to Facebook and just plug in DragonCon Urban Fantasy, it'll take you right there. We do have the YouTube channel, which has all of our Supernatural Rewind panels, along with the author interview series. I do. My track is a hybrid track. We do cover both media and books. And if you go to YouTube and do the same thing, plug in DragonCon Urban Fantasy, it will take you directly there. And we do also have a Twitter. If you would go there and do the same thing, you will also find us. It's not quite as active as the other 2 places, but it's still there. So I hope you'll come and check out some of our programming. You'll see some familiar faces.
And I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com and morganbryce.com. The social media on seemingly all the platforms is one variation of those names, so pretty easy to find. I run the Supernatural TFWNC group here on Facebook. I'm a regular staff columnist for the Winchester Family Business Blog, but mostly you can find me here on Continual. So thank you all so much for spending time with us and exploring some of the families of Supernatural. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more Supernatural coming up soon, so we'll see you online.